In 1651, Sir William Phipps was born in Maine, then a part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Despite being of humble origin, uneducated, and fatherless from a young age, he rapidly advanced from shepherd boy to shipwright, ship's captain, treasure hunter, the first New England native to be knighted, and the first royally appointed governor of the province of Massachusetts Bay. Captain Phips was famous in his lifetime for recovering a large treasure from a sunken Spanish galleon in 1686. Let's learn more about what happened.
Sir William Phipps and the Silver Ship. The story of a poor boy, born on the edge of the wilderness, at a despicable plantation on the river of Kennebec, and almost the farthest village of the eastern settlement of New England, yet who ended his life as governor and nobleman, is what we have to tell. It is one of the most romantic stories in history. He was born in 1651, being a scion of the early days of the Puritan colony. He came from a highly prolific pioneer family. He had 20 brothers and 5 sisters, yet none but himself of this extensive family are heard of in history or biography. Genius is too rare a quality to be spread through such a flock. His father was a gunsmith. Of the children, William was one of the youngest. After his father's death he helped his mother at sheep-keeping in the wilderness till he was 18 years of age. Then there came an unaccountable impulse upon his mind that he was born to greater matters. The seed of genius planted in his nature was beginning to germinate. The story of the early life of William Phipps may be told in a few words. From sheep-tending he turned to carpentry, becoming an expert ship-carpenter. With this trade at his fingers' ends, he went to Boston, and there first learned to read and write, accomplishments which had not penetrated to the Kennebec. His next step was to marry, his wife being a widow, a Mrs. Hull, with little money but good connections. She lifted our carpenter a step higher in the social scale. At that time, says his biographer, he was one tall beyond the common set of men, and thick as well as tall, and strong as well as thick, exceedingly robust, and able to conquer such difficulties of diet and of travel as would have killed most men alive. He was of a very comely, though a very manly countenance, and in character of a most incomparable generosity. He hated anything small or mean, was somewhat choleric, but not given to nourish malice. To this notable young man there soon came an adventure. He had become a master workman, and built a ship for some Boston merchants on the river Sheepscote, a few leagues from his native Kennebec. The vessel was finished and ready to be loaded with lumber, but its first cargo proved to be very different from that which Phips had designed, for Indians attacked the settlement. The inhabitants, flying for their lives, crowded on board the vessel, and Phips set sail with a shipload of his old friends and neighbors, who could pay him only in thanks. It is not unlikely that some of his own brothers and sisters were among the rescued. Certainly, the extensive family of Phips must have spread somewhat widely over the coast region of Maine. William Phipps's first adventure had proved unprofitable except in works of charity, but he was not one to be easily put down, having in his nature an abundance of the perilous stuff of ambition. He was not the man to sit down and wait for fortune to come to him. Rather, he belonged to those who go to seek fortune. He was determined, he told his wife, to become captain of a king's ship, and owner of a fair brick house in the Green Lane of North Boston. It took him some 8 or 9 years to make good the first of these predictions, and then, in the year 1683, he sailed into the harbor of Boston as captain of the Algier Rose, a frigate of 18 guns and 95 men. It was by the magic wand of sunken silver that our hero achieved this success. The treasures of Peru, loaded on Spanish ships, had not all reached the ports of Spain. Some cargoes of silver had gone to the bottom of the Atlantic. Phips had heard of such a wreck on the Bahamas, had sailed thither, and had made enough money by the enterprise to pay him for a voyage to England. While in the Bahamas he had been told of another Spanish wreck, wherein was lost a mighty treasure, hitherto undiscovered. It was this that took him to England. He had made up his mind to be the discoverer of this sunken treasure ship. The idea took possession of him wholly. His hope was to interest some wealthy persons, or the government itself, in his design. The man must have had in him something of that silver-tongued eloquence which makes persuasion easy, for the royalties at Whitehall heard him with favour and support, and he came back to New England captain of a king's ship, with full powers to search the seas for silver. And now we have reached the verge of the romance of the life of William Phipps. He had before him a difficult task, but he possessed the qualities which enable men to meet and overcome difficulty. The silver ship was said to have been sunk somewhere near the Bahamas. The exact spot it was not easy to learn, for half a century had passed since its demise. Sailing thither in the Algier Rose, Phips set himself to find the sunken treasure. Here and there he dredged, using every effort to gain information, trying every spot available, ending now in disappointment, starting now with renewed hope, continuing with unflagging energy. His frequent failures would have discouraged a common man, but Phips was not a common man, and would not accept defeat. The resolute searcher had more than the difficulties of the sea bottom to contend with. His men lost hope, grew weary of unprofitable labour, and at last rose in mutiny. They fancied that they saw their way clear to an easier method of getting silver, and marched with drawn cutlasses to the quarter-deck, where they bade their commander to give up his useless search and set sail for the South Seas. There they would become pirates, and get silver without dredging or drudging. It was a dangerous crisis. Phips stood with empty hands before that crew of armed and reckless men. Yet choler and courage proved stronger than sword-blades. Roused to fury, he rushed upon the mutineers with bare hands, knocked them down till the deck was strewn with fallen bodies, and by sheer force of anger and fearlessness quelled the mutiny, and forced the men to return to their duty. They were quelled, but not conquered. The daring adventurer was to have a more dangerous encounter with these would-be pirates. Some further time had passed in fruitless search. The frigate lay careened beside a rock of a Bahamian island, some 8 or 10 men being at work on its barnacled sides, while the others had been allowed to go on shore. They pretended that they wished to take a ramble in the tropical woods. What they wished to do was to organize a more effectual mutiny, seize the ship, leave the captain and those who held with him on that island, and sail away as lawless rovers of the sea. Under the great trees of that Spanish island, moss-grown and bowery, in a secluded spot which nature seemed to have set aside for secret councils, the mutinous crew perfected their plans, and signed a round-robin compact which pledged all present to the perilous enterprise. One man they needed to make their project sure. They could not do without the carpenter. He was at work on the vessel. They sent him a message to come to them in the woods. He came, heard their plans, affected to look on them favourably, but asked for a half-hour to consider the matter. This they were not disposed to grant. They must have an answer at once. The carpenter looked about him. Dark and resolute faces surrounded him. Yet he earnestly declared he must have the time. They vigorously declared he should not. He was persistent, and in the end prevailed. The half-hour respite was granted. The carpenter then said that he must return to the vessel. His absence from his work would look suspicious. They could send a man with him to see that he kept faith. The enterprise would be in danger if the captain noticed his absence. The mutineers were not men of much intelligence or shrewdness, and consented to his return. The carpenter, who had at heart no thought of joining the mutineers, had gained his point and saved the ship. In spite of the guard upon his movements, he managed to get a minute's interview with Captain Phips, in which he told him what was afoot. He was quickly at his post again, and under the eyes of his guard, but he had accomplished his purpose. Captain Phips was quick to realize the danger, and called about him those who were still in the ship. They all agreed to stand by him. By good fortune the gunner was among them. The energetic captain lost no time in devising what was to be done. During the work on the ship the provisions had been taken ashore and placed in a tent, where several pieces of artillery were mounted to defend them, in case the Spaniards to whom the island belonged should appear. Quickly but quietly these guns were brought back to the ship. Then they and the other guns of the ship were loaded and brought to bear on the tent, and the gangway which connected the ship with the land was drawn on board. No great time had elapsed, but Captain Phips was ready for his mutinous crew. To avert suspicion during these preparations, the carpenter, at the suggestion of Phips, had gone ashore and announced himself as ready to join the mutineers. This gave them great satisfaction, and after a short interval to complete their plans, they issued in a body from the woods and approached the ship. As they drew near the tent, however, they looked at one another in surprise and dismay. The guns were gone. "We are betrayed," was the fearful whisper that ran around the circle. "Stand off, you wretches, at your peril!" cried the captain, in stern accents. The guns of the ship were trained upon them. They knew the mettle of Captain Phips. In a minute more cannon balls might be ploughing deadly gaps through their midst. They dared not fly, they dared not fight. Panic fear took possession of them. They fell upon their knees in a body, begged the captain not to fire, and vowed that they would rather live and die with him than any other man in the world. All they had found fault with was that he would not turn pirate, otherwise he was the man of their hearts. The captain was stern, they were humble and beseeching. In the end he made them deliver up their arms, and then permitted them to come on board, a thoroughly quelled body of mutineers. But Captain Phips knew better than to trust these men a third time. The moment the ship was in sailing trim, he hoisted anchor and sailed for Jamaica, where he turned the whole crew, except the few faithful ones, adrift, and shipped another crew, smaller, but, as he hoped, more trustworthy. The treasure ship still drew him like a magnet. He had not begun to think of giving up the search. Discouragement, failure, mutiny were to him but incidents. The silver was there somewhere, and have it he would, if perseverance would avail.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.